Hello, welcome to AP Chemistry, problem number 99 out of chapter 3. This is given in your homework. We have the balanced equation right there. And this is one of the limiting reagent types we'll be working with. It's asking us what mass of silver sulfide is produced from a mix of 2 grams of silver and 2 grams of this S8 molecule. So kind of a strange molecule, but really first want to look and make sure we have a balanced equation. It does give it to us in this case. It doesn't ask us to specifically balance it. You can also tell because there are already coefficients in front of these two things. We would first want to read this then as being 16 units of silver react with 1 unit of this S8 molecule, put a 1 there, to give me 8 units of silver sulfide. So it's asking us what mass of this silver sulfide is produced from a mix of 2 grams of silver and 2 grams of S8. Well, in this case, you do not know which one is determining how much product that you make. In other words, you do not know which one is your limiting reagent. So, first part of the problem is to determine which limits. We don't know. It's 2 grams of each, so it seems maybe that they react in the exact same, but we can't answer it that way. We first have to convert into moles. So let me do that first. So we have 2 grams of silver. We divide that by its molar mass, which is 107.9 grams per mole. And we get 1.9 times 10 to the negative second moles of silver. We do the same thing for our sulfur, 2 grams of S8 divided by its molar mass. We're going to end up with 7.8 times 10 to the negative 3 moles of S8. Again, the amount of substance there would be 32 the molar mass of sulfur times 8. Don't have that in front of me right now, but that's where I got that number from to get the moles of the S8 molecule. But we're not done here yet, because if you notice, this is in moles, and that's correct. We want to compare those things. So it looks like we definitely do have more moles of silver than we do have moles of my S8 molecule. But the problem is that if you look back at my balanced equation, I need 16 times more silver than I need moles of my S8 molecule. So at this point, I have to do one of two things. Either figure out how much convert moles of silver into moles of S8 that are needed, or convert moles of S8 into moles of silver that are needed. And really, it's the same analysis, where just depends on what we do with that number 16. We're going to convert this into moles of silver into moles of S8. So for every 16 moles of silver, we're going to need only 1 mole of S8. I'm going to take that number and divide then by 16. So once we do that, 1.9 times 10 to the negative second divided by 16, we end up with 0.001186 moles of S8. Okay, all it tells me is that if I'm going to react with all of this silver, the 1.9 times 10 to the negative second, I'm going to need this much S8. Okay? The question is, do I have that? Yes, I do. I have 0.0078 moles. Just converting that out of its scientific notation. I have 0.0078, which means that I have excess S8. In other words, if I'm going to use up all the silver, I'm going to have plenty of S8 then to react. So in other words, that 0.001186 moles of the S8 molecule is going to be all that we need, and we have 0.0078 moles. So by definition, all the silver will react with that 0.001186 moles of S8, and that leaves whatever the difference between 0.0078 and 0.001186 of excess S8 molecule. Doesn't fully answer our question though, because we're still trying to figure out what the mass of the silver sulfide that's produced from this 2 grams. We've determined what's limiting. Now we need to determine how much mass that will make of my product. Now it turns into a grams to grams conversion problem where your sheet might be helpful, and we'll go through here on the next page. All right, so we now determine that the 0.001186 moles of S8 is then going to be all that is needed to react with all that silver. We have much more than that, therefore it's in excess, and all the silver will react, which means it is limiting, so we can answer our question. All right, so we begin with our 1.9 times 10 to the negative 2 moles of silver. We want to convert that then into the moles of our desired product, which is our Ag2S. So we take our 1.9 times 10 to the negative second moles of silver over 1. We know that for every 16 moles of silver, we get 8 moles of Ag2S. As a reminder, look back to your balanced equation. 16 and 8. That's where I'm getting that number from. We get that out of there. But that's not there yet. We still want to get from that moles of silver sulfide into grams, so we can find the molar mass. The molar mass is found from adding the molar masses of 2 silvers and sulfur. 247.9 in 1 mole. Once we multiply that all through, we should have an answer in terms of grams of silver sulfide. You get about 2.4 grams of Ag2S. The question was asking us what mass is produced from a mixture of 2 grams of silver and 2 grams of S8. There's our answer. Part B then is saying what mass of which reactant is left unreacted. Well, we already know the answer to the first part. Let's go back one page. We learned right here that all we needed was 0.001186 moles of S8. So all we needed to react with our entire amount of silver. That's why it was called limiting for silver, and that's why this is called excess. So we know that I only needed this many moles of my S8 molecule. And I've got this many over here. All right? So let's go back. Okay? So how much of which reactant will be unreacted when the reaction is done? Which one is in excess? So if we take our 1.9 times 10 to the negative 2 moles of silver, and we convert that into grams of S8. Now there's other ways to do this too, but here's the way that I'm going to do it here. If I go from moles of silver into grams of S8, that will tell me then how much I should have used, and then I can subtract that from how much I was initially given to figure out how much should be left over. So if I take that 1.9 times 10 to the negative second, and I look at my mole ratio, for every 16 moles of silver, I only need 1 mole of S8, so 16 moles of Ag, 1 mole of S8, that cancels. And I know the molar mass of S8 is 256.56. Those units then cancel, and I'm left with an answer that will give me grams of my S8. Should get about 0.30 grams of S8. Okay, what that number tells me is that if I'm going to react all that 2 grams of silver, which I already determined was limiting, I should use up about 0.30 grams of S8. How much should I actually have? Well, if we look back at your problem, at the very beginning we had 2 grams. So we had 2.0 grams of S8 initially, minus the 0.30 grams that reacted, and I'll be left with my answer of about 1.7 grams remain. Again, of my S8. Okay? So in that kind of problem, you first had to take your balanced equation, identify which was limiting. Once we found which was limiting, we could find out any part of the equation that we wanted to, including how much of our excess reagent we actually used and then how much was left over. We'll go over more like this in class. If you have any questions, feel free to email or bring it up in class.